Welcome to our Japanese style living environment webinar series. We will be in conversation soon with Randall Lee about curating the Japanese style garden. Thank you for joining us. We would like to extend a special thanks to our partners who make this programming possible. The Japan Foundation Center for Global Partnership and to the Oakland Fukuoka Sister City Association. Please visit their websites for more information. My name is Peter Boyer, your moderator. I'm pleased to announce Randall Lee. Randall Lee will describe the growth, fostering, and lifelong care of a Japanese garden. He'll describe fostering freshly born gardens, as well as remedial work on gardens in disrepair. Randall will highlight the role of plants, especially woody plants, in the Japanese living environment's garden component. Randall's specialties are aesthetic pruning of ornamental trees and shrubs. He has made presentations for the North American Japanese Garden Association, Aesthetic Pruners Association, Merritt College Aesthetic Pruning Club, and numerous bonsai clubs in California. Randall brings over 30 years experience specializing in Japanese black pines, Japanese maples, Japanese garden pruning, dwarf conifers, bonsai repotting and pruning consultations, lectures, and bonsai workshops to this presentation. His broad interdisciplinary experience in creating gardens, fostering their development and sustaining their infrastructure, and familiarity with the integrated living environment developed in Japan inform this presentation. Randall is also active in the East Bay Bonsai Society, eastbaybonsai.org, as a master teacher for the Merritt College Bonsai and Aesthetic Pruning Clubs, Aesthetic, AESTHETIC, pruning.org, and in the Aesthetic Pruners Association, of which he's past president. AestheticPrunersAssociation.org. He's also a member of the American Conifer Society, conifersociety.org, and North American Japanese Garden Association, najga.org, NAJGA.org. There he is. Bill, I've just allowed you to unmute yourself and talk because we're going to introduce Randall Lee. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Peter and Randall. Can
Bill,
you hear me?
you've known Randall.
Hi, Bill.
Hey, Randall.
Bill,
Hi, Bill.
Hey, everybody. Bill Castellan was our presenter last week. And Bill and Randall are really the twin towers of the outdoors portion of the Japanese style living environment. In that, Bill presented on creating a garden setting. So, and we saw lots of great slides of Bill and his crew doing impossible feats, shaping the earth and plugging in lots of geology, lots of rocks, and planting that garden and really creating a scene. And when Bill is all done and he patted down the last mulch and planted the last little ground cover, him and his incredible crew, he goes on to the next job. And who's going to bring up baby, right? the garden's born, plants are tiny, and you need someone there who makes sure they grow out right and that they have the proper spatial composition and relationships that a garden builder like Bill had imagined from the start. Well, that would be Randall Lee. So Bill, why don't you introduce Randall Lee? You've known this guy for a long time and you guys work together a lot.
Sure. Well, it's nice to be here. I've known Randall since I think 1991, somewhere in that. I think I just.
Oh, sorry, Bill. I just promoted you to panelist so we could see you could see you talking. Oops. There'll be a slight delay, folks, while Bill joins us as on video.
Do I have to do something, Peter, or are you doing it?
You don't have to do nothing. Just
Good. Okay, so I've known Randall since the early 90s, and we came up together with Dennis Makashima. We were active members in the Merit Group for quite a long time.
You just gotta think, there you go. Hey, Bill,
Okay.
there you go, but you're on the bottom corner of your video there. Move your screen around, your camera.
Okay, is this better?
Yay! Yeah, well, you're cut off at the,
I can't see myself, I
oh,
apologize.
tilt it down. We're seeing you're cut off at the forehead. There you go. Thanks, Bill.
All right. Okay, good. So as I've been saying, I've known Randall a long time. We've been involved in many, many projects together, too many to even remember. And Peter, Randall's mainly my first choice for pruners when I create a garden, even though he's too busy to get to most of them. And you saw pictures last week of gardens that Randall prunes, and we'll probably see more today of some of my gardens that he's pruning in his pictures. But anyway, as I said last week too, this is as important as building the garden is the pruning and the maintenance involved. There's no point in building these kind of gardens if you don't have people who can do pruning at this level. And it's a very high level. The garden is only going to be as good as the pruner. And I can't stress enough how important that is. So this is a really important topic, and Randall's definitely the person to speak to it. So I think you've probably all been waiting a long time here just to hear him start talking. So other people have been talking. So why don't I just turn it over to Randall, and you're in for a treat. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. All right,
Thanks,
Randall,
Bill.
I'm going to get out of your way. You're on, Randall. Welcome.
Well, hi, everyone. Thanks to Peter Boyer for putting this all together, and thank Bill for that really nice introduction. And sorry for my bluish tint glasses, but these are my new glasses I got for working on the computer. So this is really way out of my league, I think, because I'm usually just pruning trees. I don't do that much on the computer. And so for this presentation, I got a MacBook Air. I did a PowerPoint on my Windows 10 computer. So it's just like, it's a miracle I got it this far. But thanks everyone for joining this webinar, and hope you find some information that you like, and maybe this you'll find out something that you didn't know. And so my experience is working on, I guess you could call them Japanese influence gardens in America. I've traveled to Japan and I've seen some private gardens. I've seen the Imperial Garden, and I've been to public gardens in the United States. So when you see my slideshow, you'll see the different varying gardens I have. Some of them are like, well, geez, why do they have that there? But some of these are really old gardens, could date back from the 50s. And they might not have, that might have been state of the art at that time. And then you'll see some more, maybe the newer gardens, especially the ones that Bill Castellan has put in. And you can see the change. I like them all. I mean, they all got really nice plants. Either I've raised from young plants, or I inherited them. Someone else pruned them, And I'm now the present caretaker, and someone else will be the caretaker after I can't take care of them, but some of them could be over 60 years or plus old, which in America could be old. I mean, Japan, it's not old. But so enough looking at me, and let's see if I can get the share screen will work right, and we can get the show going. Okay, so
Someone just said you're not alone, Randall.
what's that?
Having trouble with Zoom. Okay, Randall, I have the
Well,
spotlight
yeah,
for
there's
video.
always the screen sharing box at the top. I can't seem to stop that. Okay, well, let me start a little bit. This is about curating the Sukia garden. So for me, it's always about the Sukia style garden is more about an extension. A garden is an extension of the house that you live in. Should be viewed from inside the house. Should bring you into another place in nature. Whether it's maybe it's a mountain scene or it's a stream running by, but it should be, I think, a calming influence. It sets the mood. In America, we do have a lot of front gardens that face the street, the sidewalk. It isn't viewed from the front of the house. And I think it's just a different style here because people like big ranch homes and open fronts. They don't, like when I was in Japan, you go into there's a wall, you go into a courtyard in front of someone's house. And it's really nice. It's their own little piece of sanctuary. So our backyards kind of have more of that Sukia style where you can view it from the house, and it just like you can just enter into your little piece of nirvana. But even then, the back of the house has challenges. Sometimes it's a steep slope, there's a drop off, the house is raised up so many feet, so it doesn't look comfortable. So what I wanted to do was start a little about my history of how I became a aesthetic pruner. And this first slide here is a picture of a zigzag bridge. And that's kind of like my life until growing up. I went to college at that time. It was late 70s. And what was really big was people getting business majors or studying computers. Back then it was called data processing. And that's what most of my friends got into. I didn't really care too much for that, but I did like taking science classes. And I did take a lot of geology classes and geography classes. And it's funny how this all came back into my life in the future. But I was, I took a lot of classes. I was like a professional college student. And then at one point, I didn't really seem to like doing computer stuff or other things. And I thought I'd become a geology major, but physics and me just don't get along. So I was trying to decide what I wanted to do. And so I was looking through one of my old drawers in my folders. And then I found this leaf collection I made when I was like second or third grade. So I started flipping through this leaf collection, and in it I wrote, oh, I think when I grow up, I want to do something with plants. So I said, oh, wow, I guess I'll take some classes up at Merritt College Horticulture Department. And so I took a couple classes, and I said, oh, this is really it. This is probably around 1988. And along the way, I met Dennis Makishima. And this zigzag bridge is like, in the beginning, I really couldn't decide what I wanted to do. I wanted to do this field, that field, this field, but it all kind of was in the science field. So my life kind of paused, but it kept going in the general direction, but it kept pausing. So even after I got to Merritt, I started taking classes. I still had to decide what I wanted to do. Do I want to be a gardener? Do I want to be a pruner? Do I want to be a landscape contractor? The travel was really beautiful. Here's a beautiful koi. So, but But eventually, what really started it all was these 3 bonsais that originally were given to my mom as presents. And these were back around 1984, 1986. And I'll go back to these things later, especially about how we have to nurture a plant and how it eventually, through those years, it evolves to a really beautiful mature tree. Sadly, this one didn't make it, but I still have the one on the left, the one on the right here. So 1988, what is my path in life? So I took all these classes at Merit, and along the way, here's my journey. I hope you're all excited. That's my cat. She's excited. I went to Merit College Horticulture Department, started taking classes, and along the way, I met Dennis Makashima, and you've heard Bill talk about him, and he's kind of like, we think of it as, I know, he's like the grandfather of aesthetic pruning, at least in America. And so by meeting him through Merit, what I did is I had signed up for a bonsai class, and he called me up and he says, well, who are you? Because I was the one person he didn't know who signed up. And after that, I was like hooked. I'd already done some bonsai. And then I found out that there was a Merit College aesthetic pruning club, bonsai and pruning club, and they had projects. And I says, oh, well, this is great. I got to go to this. And so he's the mentor for many, many students in pruning. And so this is Merit College, the landscape horticulture facility, and this is like their central circle right when you come to the building. And so I was just starting a project up here with a few other students. There was Michael Alliger, maybe he had been at it for a couple of years, Paul Randall. And we started working on this birch grove. And so we were all pretty much rookies at it. And Dennis would give us some instructions, we'd do something. And then we were like stuck. We didn't know what to do. We kind of asked each other, no one knew what to do. So we said, well, we better do something since Dennis is not here, because when he comes back and we haven't done anything, he's gonna be mad. So we started working on the back trees, which is kind of hard to see here. These are the front over here. And so he came back and he had this look on his face, which he was not happy. And I was like, uh-oh, what did we do wrong? And so he told us, you guys pruned the back trees first, and now you took away all my options. Because he says, if I cut something off bigger in the front, I might want to leave some branches on the back tree. And I was staying there going like, ooh, boy, we messed up. Don't get Dennis mad. So that's something I never forgot from all those years. And so this is an early group from Merit College Pruning Club at the Japanese Garden at Lakeside Park in Oakland. And there's Dennis with a mustache. Can you believe that? There's Michael Alliger, there's Paul Randall, Keith, I think his name is George. So in doing these activities in the Merit College Pruning Club, we actually got a project to work on these really old pines at Demoto's nursery, Mr. Demoto right here. And he's like a legend in the Japanese community, especially in the nursery trade, what he did with just growing bonsai and landscape trees. So it was really a pleasure to meet such a historic guy. I talked to a lot of people in the Japanese community, and they just have so much respect for him. And so, and through the Merit Pruning Club, so I'm kind of describing what I did to be able to learn the craft of pruning in a Japanese style garden. And I consider myself really fortunate to be able to meet the people and to go through the Merit program and to just gain all this knowledge. Why I did this at a certain time, the decisions, everything just kind of came together. And this is Peter Boyer on top of this gigantic ladder working on a really big tree. It looks like the Ichinose estate.
That's a
So
cut.
this is a Lakeside Park Japanese garden, maybe mid-80s. And Dennis was asked to come and restore it because the Japanese American community that was gardeners were working on it, I guess they got old and they just weren't able to work on it anymore, and the city doesn't have a gardeners on staff to maintain it. So this is what it looked like. And then after they did some work, I brought it back. Of course, this is still quite a while ago. But right now, I think Bill Costello and Dick Austin run the volunteers main garden. And if you want to learn more about the history of this Japanese Lakeside Park, there will be an APA, which is the Aesthetic Printers Association, virtual tree talk. That'll be Sunday, October 4th. You can register at that website. It's like $5 for APA members and $20 if you're not a member. So Dick is like, I don't know, is he like 85, 88? I mean, he's just going gangbusters. I always like to refer to him as the old man of the APA, but Dick is a really great guy. If you want something done, you would call Dick. He always comes through. So the pruning club then also worked on building the bonsai garden at Lakeside Park in Oakland. There's Mas Umizumi, a well-renowned Japanese garden builder. There's Dick, that looks like Bill up there, Rich Huss, and there's me, actually like the inspector. And along the way, 2004, I got married. So that's another part of my path there. And then I went to Beijing with my wife. There's the Forbidden Palace. And I found my first concrete tree and a concrete log here. And this is the style of the garden in China, which was, I guess, Tim Hanskin, who's the editor for Sukia Living magazine, says there are no real good gardens in China, I guess, at least to the Japanese standard. But I thought it was kind of interesting that, the concrete tree. So now it's about 2010, and Grant Forrester here, who's a past president of the Aesthetic Printers Association, gave me a call and says, Randall, we're looking to fill an officer position on the Aesthetic Printers Association. So I wasn't involved directly in the formation, like the bylaws and all that, but it was like a fledgling organization, and Grant says, would you like to be a secretary? I says, oh, okay, I'll help, build the organization. And so that was in 2010. I became secretary, then I became president, so I'm now past president. I still serve on the board. Now Dina Blackwell, who is leading a pruning event for the pruning club, can't make it, but Dina Blackwell is now the president. And if you if you listen to Bill's presentation last week, she's a pruner at least a few of those gardens. And she actually works with me in another garden that I'll be showing you in the future slide. So, APA, Aesthetic Printers Association, that is a professional organization, a nonprofit, promotes aesthetic pruning and supports aesthetic pruners in their field of work. And we are proud that we probably are the only ones who certify an aesthetic pruner in the United States. So it's a complete process, but we wanted an organization to could raise the standards. There's so many people that say they are pruners or aesthetic pruners, but their quality of the pruning is not very good. So it's a combination of aesthetics and the science. Pruning the trees, but also keeping them healthy. So as far as other areas where you can gain more knowledge about Japanese style gardens, there's NAJGA, North American Japanese Garden Association, which puts on a conference, biennial conference every 2 years, and it also has regional ones, and that's a great source for information. I also belong to the American Conference Society because they have conifers is their passion, and a lot of them are all members are also bonsai enthusiasts and also Japanese garden enthusiasts too. You can also go to your local Japanese garden and volunteer. There's always, I'm sure they always need help, and you can see there if there's someone there that will be willing to teach you. In the Bay Area, we're really fortunate to have a lot of Japanese style gardens. We've got the Merritt College landscape department. There's a whole pruning series there. And now that it's gone onto webinars, you can take it from anywhere. Before, people said, oh, yeah, I have to travel there. It's going to take me an hour. And I said, I knew someone who came in from Georgia. And if they have to drive an hour, this person flew all across the country. But now with the webinars, that you can take classes at Landscape Horticulture Department online, which is fantastic. The reach can go forever, wherever the web can take you. So I will now start the show. Okay, so this is actually my mom's garden, and back in the 80s, and you can tell by the quality of the picture. And so it's like, how do you get your experience? Well, you're gonna find trees to work on. Your friends, your parents, their friends, and it's just a lot of repetition, and you can also see what you did, what the results are of what you did. I mean, if you just keep pruning and keep doing the same thing and don't revise it, you're just gonna get the same result. So this one was installed by, I can't remember his last name, Yoshi. He was born in Japan and he came here. And it's interesting, his wife and two sons live in Japan. He lived over here and he built gardens and things like that. So this is like, maybe a couple years later, it's starting to develop. Sorry for the quality of the picture. But this is a classic hill and pond garden, the pine tree. Yeah.
Members of the audience might like to know the approximate location of these gardens, like, San Francisco Bay Area or.
Okay, this is in Alameda, California. So this is actually on filled land. It's sandy soil, relatively high water table, but it's they dumped a lot of clay-based topsoil, which, if you ever want to do a garden, you really don't want to mix two different soil textures, clay on top of sand. So it does have its challenges. It's a little windy. It doesn't get really hot, but they did bring a lot of soil to create a mound for improve the drainage. So we're talking like highs in the summer, generally maybe in the 70s, or we get a really heat wave, it could be in the 90s. It has gotten warmer. I've noticed over the 30 plus years I've been doing work. So just advances on. The trees are developing, the pads starting to develop. And you can see there's a lot of plants in here. So it seems to be like they wanted to look good right away, so the landscapers put a lot of plants in. And I'll show some pictures of what Bill has done. And Bill doesn't put as many plants, but in so many years, you'll see that it's all filled in beautifully. And you don't have to be removing plants, but you just got to have the vision to see what's going to happen in the future. So this is today. This is 2020. So what is that? 34 years? Wow. Just shows you so it's now at the stage where it needs a little, we call renovation, restoration. You can see like the Korean grass here got invaded by the weedy grass from next door. So I'm now in the process of killing it off. I'm going to replant it and clean it up. And of course, I got to probably get back to doing a little more pruning in the fall and get things a little bit back in proportion. We got a little bit of I think a fungus on the juniper, but I can clear that up. But these were all decanted in the spring, and now it's grown out since then. I do decandle these usually in June, actually usually July 4th, because I usually go to my mom's house, I watch the parade, and I go and prune her pine trees. This year there was no parade, so I managed to prune all the pine trees in one day, and that's what I usually do. So my mom is the one who really appreciated Japanese gardens, and so I guess she was the influence of, she wanted to go to bonsai shows, so I went with her. My dad, not so much. It just got interesting. He's an accountant, or he's passed away. He was an accountant by trade. So I'm now going to show you how these trees have grown up. And this is the pine tree, and you can see this. When we first planted, I was going, this is kind of an ugly duckling. I mean, look at it. Look at this big knob, and there's all these funny angles, and here's all the Korean grass, which was growing gangbusters at the time. And the neighbor's big flax and ivy. Thank goodness that's all gone now. So after a couple years, we've got it down to here. There was a long piece sticking way up here that's cut off. And you can start to see these pads develop. Old tree has branches with fuller foliage. I mean, it's an old tree. It's just got, this was getting bark, but it should have some branches with some width. So the flax is gone, thank goodness. And in 2020, this is it, all padded out. A little bit of spider mite damage, which I have taken care of, but it did get to some of the needles, made them a little bit yellow. But other than that, it's doing pretty well. You can see here's all that weedy grass that's all going to come out. And this magnolia tree's roots are all over the place, which causes an issue. It sucks up a lot of the water. So this is the main tree back in the late 80s. And it's just kind of growing. And remember, at this time, I really didn't know what I was doing. I was just kind of like, oh, you cut off the candles. That was what they call that blind decandling. And which, if any of you subscribe to the Sukiya Living Journal of Japanese Garden magazine, that's a common term. But I don't know if I mentioned it. If you do want to learn a lot about Japanese gardens, Sukiya Living magazine, the Journal of Japanese Gardening, is a really good source. So here's it growing along. You see, you got like azaleas here, which is hiding the trunk of the tree. You want to see the beautiful trunk of a Japanese black pine. And there's a liriope, which is in full sun, which isn't the best. And here's the second tree, the medium height one, which kind of looks like a long stick with not much on it. Another looks like another Charlie Brown tree, as they call it. And so here's the main tree. It's developing more, the pads. It's growing really tall because I didn't really know what to do with it. I mean, it was like, how do I control this thing? I mean, this was still like 89, so I had just started the program at Merit. So I was really a rookie at that point. And then I had met Dennis Makishima, so I talked to my mom. I said, you really should have Dennis Makishima come and take a look at your garden, because I think it's still beyond what I can do. And so he came by and he goes, Randall, I'm not gonna prune. I'm gonna teach you how to prune it. I'm not gonna do the pruning. You're gonna do the pruning. And I says, okay. And so you can see that there's all this rank growth, and there's this nice lower growth here. And many times we'll do that on a tree. We'll let it grow taller and we'll develop the apex lower. And by letting this thing grow out, it takes all the energy out here and then it keeps these branches smaller, which is what you want. You want to build these lower branches with tight internodes for it to look like an old tree. An old tree has lots of branching, lots of ramification, not these big coarse things sticking out here like this. That's not what you want. Unless you're going to have a giant 20-foot tree, you don't want that. This tree is only maybe about 7 feet tall. I really don't even need a ladder to prune it. And I did grow this branch to soften this stone right here. So there's still the azalea here. So the azalea is gone in Liripe, and the trunk is down here in the shadow. And you can see it's been reduced, the height's been reduced, and now this is starting to form the top of the tree. And even this one, the Charlie Brown tree here, which was just this long neck, is starting to branch out and get some more pads. And now in 2020, all the ugly necks are gone. They've all kind of matured out. I'm a little, maybe this one's too far across the middle of the stone, but you don't want to dissect it right in the middle. You only go a little farther over, a little bit on the right. That's all these are probably the longest I've worked on of the pine trees. If you're looking really close, they're not perfect, but it was a learning process. And my mom likes it, and she really appreciates it. So, so this is a maple tree that's in the front of the house that the landscaper who did it, we called him initially to come by and do a pruning. This is before I didn't know anything about pruning. And so he cut it back hard like this. And now I'm going like, God, that's a really bad cut. I mean, look at the stub. And so this is it growing out later that year. And a few years down the line, it got really woolly like this. And I just let it grow to get taper back where those cuts were. And then I think within 2 years, it started looking more triangular like this, but it was getting to develop ramification. Maybe not true maple form, but it was kind of a narrow space. So that was kind of the design I came up with. And this is how it looks now in 2020. Definitely a lot more maple look. One of the challenges I had was we had a 5-year drought here in Alameda. And, I did give it some water, but it was tough. It was tough for the trees. They're special trees, so I tried to give them some extra, but it was a challenge. And, one thing I noticed by looking at these pictures is this rock here used to be over here. And after a while, it's like, I go, this isn't right. This one should be over here. It's funny how things move. So this is the same landscaper Yoshi did the backyard too. It's funny how even with my other clients, if Bill does the front or the back, they land up doing the other garden too. If he does the back, he lands up also doing the front. And I guess, Bill does such good work that it's like, oh, I got to do the front too, or I got to do the back. And I'll come back and it's like, what the heck happened here? There's boulders everywhere now. And but it's always really nice. The clients have always liked what Bill has done. It's just amazing. So in this case, I guess this is kind of like interpretation of a tea garden with a water basin. This is cement blue lantern, which really probably should get a granite one. But at this time, this is like maybe early 80s. No, I'm sorry, late 80s. because the front garden was done in the middle 80s. And so this is that Irish, no, this is the Scotch moss, which is lighter, which takes an extreme amount of water, and it's really hard. This gravel, the gray gravel, I mean, this black and white gravel, now it changed to a gray gravel. But the challenge with this garden is, where's the borrowed scenery? It's an apartment complex and a field behind a school. Not a great Sukia style environment. And over the years, always something would bother me about this garden. And I would talk to my mom, there's something not right. There's something not right about this garden. When you get down to ground level, it's okay. But viewing it from the house, which is the family room, the big sliding doors, you're looking down this garden. There's some problem with it. So I was reading the Sukia Living magazine, the article about how you should be viewing a garden. And this was a perfect example. You can't be looking down on a garden. It should be, you should look out at the same level as your house. So I told my mom this, and she said, Randall, I'm not raising the garden. I said, well, I'm just saying that this is the issue with it. I mean, we did plant shrubs back here, but they didn't survive very well because there was a guy that was mowing the field back here, and every time he ran his mower, he'd hit the trunks of my shrubs, and you could see him move, boom, 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 boom. And he basically girdled them. So that was, it was tough. So this was, there's a water problem here because the field behind the house doesn't drain. And so the water would run through my mom's yard, and I guess we should have put in maybe a dry stream to utilize that effect. You see the flooding, and here's the electrical cord for the sump pump. But this is, here's the bench. You can sit here and view it. And a nice olive tree here, the nice bumps on it. That's age and beauty. They got these bumps on the trunk, like burls and arching branches, and it cascades down. So, and this is it like a few years later, starting to grow, but you still can see, the view is just terrible behind it. And these sticks here would prevent animals were coming through and sitting on the plant, stepping on them. I couldn't figure out if they were cats or raccoons or what. And this is another pine tree at my mom's house. And this one was actually given to my parents by her brother. And I think he got this for $1.99 at the local, like, Payless or something. And so it's let's see, this is what, 68, over 50 years old, but the bark is just nothing to write home about. There's no big plates. Its genes are just not that good. I mean, it's old. And so originally pruning was by Mr. Kisanuki, who was a Japanese carpenter who built, I should go back. Well, maybe that doesn't show. He built the fence. He also built the neighbor's fence. Neighbor's fence is a little fancier, but he built this fence. And he did the initial pruning many years ago, and then this one was done by Yoshi, the landscaper. And so there was a really big head here, huge head. So he solved it all in one cut.
Randall, you got to unmute yourself.
Unmuted now?
Yeah, okay. So back up about 10 seconds or so. And just
Uh-oh. So what part did we miss out on? Okay, I'm not sure what everyone missed out on, but did everyone miss out on the story about how my uncle got my parents this pine tree for $1.99 from like the local like Payless or something? This tree was initially stubbed by Mr. Kitsunuki, who was a Japanese carpenter, and he built the fence way back in the 70s, early 70s, and the neighbor's fence. You can kind of see the Japanese design. Ours was just simpler because my mom didn't want to match the neighbors for some reason. And so this last pruning here was done by Yoshi, the landscape contractor who built the front and back garden. And he wanted to solve this really big head it had, so he cut the heck out of it. And I was like, my mom was, and I was kind of in shock, you know, cut so much off. And so it's a little hard to see, it's a little in the shadows here, but this is maybe just a few years ago. We had a little work party. I think there was Nancy Buell, Melissa Hyams, and maybe Dina. We all worked on this tree. It was a little overgrown, but it's filled back in pretty nice. And it does soften this end of the garden and this house. So this is an opposite side of the house of the tea garden. Okay, now we're on to another garden. This is also an Alameda installed garden. One of my clients that I was putting her maples in the front, and she wanted to do something to the back, and she wanted to have maybe kind of an Asian influence garden. And you know, first I had to figure out, you know, it's like, who do you have that is, you know, what kind of garden do you want? Because you want to refer someone who do something that, you know, maybe specializes in that type of garden. So I think originally she wanted to design, I think I contacted Dick Austin, and then Dick contacted Bill, because first she wanted to design. If she wanted just a garden, then, you know, just Bill could just do it. And, you know, at that time, I think Bill, you'd already done the garden show garden already, but I could be wrong. Time just kind of flies. So back here used to be roses and a big old apple tree and some big brick retaining wall. And I came back and there was just boulders all over the place. It was like incredible. And then Bill had formed this giant mountain here that I call Mount Gileone, because it's like the highest place in Alameda now. I mean, it was incredible. I had no idea that this is what Bill was going to do. It was really impressive. And I always, when I see a garden built by Bill, in the beginning I always think, oh, the rocks are way too big. And I was like, but now I realize as the plants grow, the rocks are just perfect. If the rocks look just perfect after the plants are put in, they're too small. The rocks have to be oversized. And sometimes clients just go like, oh, the rocks are too big. They're too big. But once you see it, the plants develop and mature, it fits in just right. And I am never surprised when Bill puts a giant stone in now, because I know how the plants will grow. And you can maintain them up to a certain size, but you also got to be realistic about what size you want to try and keep a plant, because it may require just too much pruning and may not look natural. I mean, you want to make it grow into its natural form and not try to manipulate it to control it. It should have this nice grace and feeling about the plant and not look like it's been overly pruned, just so it will fit in that space. So you can see how small, it's a red lace leaf, and this is a green, that's a green maple. They're just really tiny. And so this is another angle of the garden. There's that little maple there. There's a big one here. It's just little Pyrrhus. And this is what it looks like now. The pond and this big green maple, the red lace leaf, and the little fern. So it's sorry that the pond didn't get cleaned out, but they were going to say, "Oh, Commander, can you come back tomorrow to clean out the pond?" I go, "No, I want to take the picture now. I don't want to have to come back." And so normally there would be, but then again, you know, when the leaves are in the pond here, it kind of shows it's the season. You know, it's starting to like go into fall, and this year it looks like they're going into fall a little earlier. So here, you know, it's a complete scene. I do prune the lace leaf maple to be kind of light and airy, but not too detailed, because I wanted to make it like everyone just enjoy the whole presence. The plants, the stones, the sound of the water. And this is the view from, I call the man cave. The husband has a room where he likes to watch TV, and that's where his window is, and that's where he comes out, and he can enjoy this scene here. And this is just another angle of the maple. This would be the view, like if you're coming in from the side gate. You can see the maples all filled in. You know, it provided a nice screening. So when I did talk to Bill, you know, what was his idea? What he wanted to do? And he wanted to have these maples arch over. This one right to left, this one left to right. There's another one behind this one here that completes the framing, the arching. And so keeping these maples small are a real challenge because they want to get bigger. And so I had to be really careful on how I grew them. I didn't try to prune them too much when they're young. They had to develop their form, but be patient enough to not reduce it too early because it could start to just take off. So this is all underneath drip, and that helps a lot, except for this one here, which turned into the gargantuan tree. It actually got too big for me to prune, so now Peter Boyer does it, and he's got the giant 14-foot ladder because I just, you know, it's just getting too hard to reach the top. But this one's been reduced some too, and it's turning out, I think, pretty nice. I think this one with the mondo grass, keeping it green and moist, has been a challenge. But just with this dwarf mondo grass, you know, you can just sit here on this bench and, you know, it's just such a joy to work here and just be here. So peaceful, tranquil, definitely, really, I think this one really came together really well. Everything. And so this is a view toward the left corner here, and you can see there's the brick wall, and it's painted brown, and you can literally walk on it. And that's what I do. I walk on there to prune the back. This maple here has always been a challenge because it tends to get powdery mildew on it a lot, and it just causes leaf drop, and it doesn't look that good. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. I think there's 6 green maples in this garden, and I think they all came from different parents. They all have their unique characteristics. So this was early spring, and they're just all starting to leaf out, and you can just see that even the growth characters are different. This is very upright and more straight. This one's very more free-flowing. The one behind this one, I couldn't get a picture. That was probably the one that's more like the average green maple. And this one you can see is just super vigorous. And it started to take over the garden. So Peter's been working this down, and it's starting to look really good. And it was originally there to soften this big telephone pole. And this is the other maple that's on the other side of the backyard. And it was a slant style. And I think Bill likes to do that to give it a little interest, because if you just have a straight maple, this one gives a flow left to right, goes around the garden. Real challenge to keep these small. I think they tend to get a lot of water here. And this one's always a balancing act, because I want to keep it this height. I'm trying to develop for ramifications. So sometimes I got to let some runners go out and save the smaller branches farther back in. And then when those smaller branches get smaller branches, I'll cut the big long coarse piece off. And then you cross your fingers. But so far it's been holding up pretty good. There used to be a red lace leaf maple in a container right here, which I thought was really beautiful, but the homeowner didn't want it there anymore. So it's now moved over a block away to another house. And Bill did the garden there too. I don't have any pictures of that one though. And so here it is, straight on shot with a really huge maple. And Peter was reducing the top and leaving the bottom. So not doing that much on the bottom, just in the reduction process. Here's the little another here with the fern and so I pruned the maple here to kind of gently grapes over the rock on the edge of the lantern and down here, but very uneven, make it look like something very natural. And this is on the shady side, so it's definitely a challenge to keep this part healthy enough. But just need very little pruning. Okay, so this is our front yard. This is an original coral bark maple. You can see the vase shape. You can see that it's still pretty vigorous. It's got these, summer growth whips on the top, which I'll cut off in the fall. And this was, I call this the hybrid maple. This one has got a lower trunk here that's got a different set of foliage than this part. But I just utilize it, and it's meant to kind of like frame this window here. And it actually looks a little more open in person than in the picture. The eye can just see through it better than a camera. But another mountain scene, you could say this is the meadow down here. So this lace leaf here used to be tucked in the corner over here, and it just had no place to grow. And then Bill put it over here on this mound, and that's where I used to put my ladder to prune this tree. And it's always the running joke. I go, Bill, you always have to put a rock or a tree where I put my ladder to prune the tree. And Bill goes, oh, you can work around it, you'll be fine. And so it's, but it is really beautiful. I love this dwarf mondo grass. There's a vase of grass here that I need to kill off. And there's the front door. You can see this is a Chamaecyparis that needs to be a third leaf cypress that needs its thinning this fall. Another view. You can see she loves maples. I think there's like 16 maples in this garden. Down the side of the house, front of the house, back of the house. There's a red one here. This is actually on the neighbor's property, but she maintains it. It's funny. She loves her maples. Absolutely. When Bill came to put in the rocks here, there was rocks all over the place. And the husband was like, there's too many rocks here. What are you gonna do with all these rocks? There's a close up. So I just try to make this the more detailed, the more focal tree. The threadleaf cypress, you can thin it out, but it just doesn't look as pretty. So this is usually what I make the focal point of this garden. So this garden here is in Danville. And I don't know, I might have worked here for over 20 years. And this is some of Bill's boulders he just placed really recently. You're probably looking like, well, isn't this kind of like an undercut area here? And, well, we haven't finished the planting and we haven't put any mulch down. So after we do the final planting, and it's just been so hot this year, we tried to hold off till fall, and it won't look like it's being undercut, which makes a boulder look unstable or dropped off someone's truck or something like that. This part here, that just was underground. Eventually it'll get a patina from being outdoors. So we'll probably put a little plant right here, add some mulch, cover up these old tree roots here, which were probably caused by maybe a weed eater. And so in this garden, sometimes the gardeners, we're probably going to make these smaller, tamamono, so they're not more in proportion. This is a new addition, the weeping red pine, and we put 3 maples in the back to provide a little more better backdrop. But we are using this as borrowed scenery, all this here. So this pine tree is very long needles. Even with the decandling, it still puts long needles. And that's just its characteristics. You could even do them later. The needles just tend to be on the long side. So you just got to work with what you got. So this was what it looked like when I first started. And this was, I think, an old, I don't know, this evergreen pear tree? There was some big old pear tree, and you can see the little of the Nile there. So it was just kind of raw. And that's how it looks now, 20 years. And in person, you actually see more spaces in here. But on the picture, there's less spaces where the trunk is. Of course, by this fall, we'll do some cleaning up of the bottom needles and thinning out the buds to 2 and look its best. So this picture is just really recently. And this is the front garden. There used to be a rhododendron here, and so it would fry up because it just gets so hot out here in Danville. And so we went and got a lace leaf maple because it's also something that's viewed from inside the house. And you see Bill added some more added this boulder here. And this is the view from inside the house. So I also pruned this maple for the view of how it looks from inside the house. Its silhouette, how the light goes through the leaves. We want to have that certain translucence. And this one is just starting to take off. It's putting out some really strong growth. So its roots are getting pretty well established. So usually after I plant something, I wait a couple of years before we start doing any pruning. I just do a little bit of light guidance because we really want to get the root system established. And we also want to develop its own character. The plant's going to tell you. You can't just completely force it what you want it to do. We just kind of guide it. That nurturing, raising the child. View from another inside the window. So there again, you see it's the view is from inside the house, but generally the main view was planned from when you approach the house. It's just a little bit different. This is the back garden, which Bill just put in. It used to be a trellis, arbor, and a bench, and that's gone. And this is viewed from the family room, and this is the foundations, and it's still waiting to have some black pebbles and some plants put in. And then this is the beginning of a pine, and this lace leaf maple. I never got to pruning it. It was really hot and it's been blistering hot. So we just left this one alone because if I pruned it, it probably would have fried up. And also they were going to do this construction. So we left this alone, probably thinned this all out this fall. And then we put a coral bark maple back here. You could have all green. I think that's what Bill likes to do with his gardens. It depends on the client. Some of them like a little bit of color. And I think a lot of my gardens seem to have that. It's just what happened. Some people like a little bit of brightness, but I understand having just plain or different shades of green looks good too. I think it's the feeling, the mood, how it all works together in the boulders, whether you have color or not. That's just personal preference. But I understand having little color as possible works really good too. A lot of the gardens in America also have these big patios. When I was in Japan, there's no big patios. There's like, we barbecue out here. We have parties, or what we used to until COVID-19 came around. And then we can get they borrow this scenery here. And I don't prune these back here. That's the neighbor. And so here's a view of the pond. The wife does all of these by hand, and she spends hours. She has lots of patience. These are mugo pines. And so here's the pine tree, black pine here. So it flows right to left, lead you to the waterfall. Big green maple that's, I think, tapped into the water supply somewhere. And there's a little Sasako camellia. And there's koi pond. Everyone always is attracted to koi ponds. We're back in the front here again. So this is the weeping red pine. We were looking for something for placing in the garden, and there was a nursery that was closing up. They were selling the property, or they actually sold the property. It was going to be developed into homes. And we found this in a box, and first it's for sale. And the lady said, "Oh yeah," and she gave the price, and I mentioned to the client, I said, "Wow, that's a really good price. Not everyone likes weeping trees, but this one is a weeping red pine, and this tall with the bark." And he loved it. I says, "You got to get that price, and don't just be keeping quiet about it." It was a really good price, really beautiful tree for this spot. It works really, really well. And they even deliver it for a really cheap price too. So here's the view of the garden. There's the koi. So the wife she also does these junipers. Occasionally I'll go and thin them out a little bit, but there's a red pine. So this is a little bit full right now. I'll probably thin it out some in this fall. You don't want to thin it out too much because then you see this house behind there. There's not another tree back here to screen it off. And this is the left side of the garden. This is an eastern white pine, really long needles. So with the white pine, it's a single flush growth. It puts out a spring flush, and usually doesn't put out a summer growth. And usually we'll pitch those. I just don't have time in the spring usually to go out and pinch them. So I actually do a pruning in the May, June, and I just cut back. I just do a lot of cut back. I cut back to smaller spring growth to keep this thing in size. And then also in the fall, or maybe even in the spring, I clean out the needles at the same time. But it's the only eastern white pine that I manage to keep ornamental. Very, very long needles, but it does tolerate the amount of shade it gets from a big flowering cherry back here. And this is the weeping blue atlas cedar. That's the beast, and very hard to control. But this is waiting to be pruned again by me shortly. This was an attempt to bring these Pittosporum shrubs smaller down in tumble montiform, so it'd be in better proportion with the boulder and the landscape here. When this boulder first went in, maybe a different angle. There was like, you could put an eye on it. It was like a Tyrannosaurus Rex head rearing itself out of the foliage. It was really funny. But this rock is huge. This picture does not show you how big it is. It is gigantic. And they still managed to get it in over here and sneak it in. I don't know how. I wasn't there. It just landed up there. Amazing. But before there was a really small boulder, and this tree has just overtaken it completely. So this is the flowering cherry in spring. It was absolutely gorgeous. I had to get a picture of it, a real showstopper. The one thing about flowering cherries in gardens is their root systems are so aggressive that they'll just take over places. I mean, they pop. Well, he had to cut the driveway replaced, but it's got in the lawn. I understand why it's not recommended for the home garden. It's just the root system is just too big. But it is really pretty, and it is the showstopper when you come up and see this house. So this is the before of the pine tree in the front, and now 20 years. I don't have any intermediate pictures on a lot of plants because there's a period where I just didn't take pictures. I apologize for that. But there's about 8 to 10 years where I just didn't take a lot of pictures. I had a lot of before and afters, and I said, well, why do I need any more? But I should have, kept chronicling. And so this is the black pine in the backyard, right to left. This one was you can see a lot of trees have been missing here, and this is gone. And the ground cover, all the vinca is gone. It gets so hot out here, it's really hard to keep all that ground cover alive. So this pine tree goes right to left, but if you stand on the other side, it goes left to right. And it used to be where the red pine is. And it actually is outstanding on the other side, going left to right. But the red pine is here now, and this is what it was when I first came along. And here's what it looks like now. The red pine is really challenging, especially here in the Bay Area in California. You can decannel it, and it won't do anything. It'll pout. There are other years you can decannel, and it'll put out a new set of summer growth. But it's very temperamental. So on this one, I never do a full decanneling. It's always a kind of a partial and some cut back. It's just not super strong, but it can put out really strong growth in the spring, and you decannel it, and it pouts. It's not happy. So it's always, this one you really have to do by feel. If you cut this one too hard, you could really cause damage. This one's always a fine balancing act to prune this one. But I think it developed to a really nice tree. I'm sorry you can't see it really well, but it has a soft round head, and it's got all these branches that kind of zig and zag. I think it's turned out as best as I can do for the conditions. So this is another garden in Alameda, just a short distance away from one of my houses I worked at since, my gosh, I don't know, maybe somewhere in the 90s. But Bill was building this garden, I guess maybe was it 10 or 11 years ago. And so you put all these boulders, you put the red maple, and you see how small these plants are. They're just really small. Look, there's the point raised manzanita. So there's another view, and there's the front, and the azaleas, little kurumi azaleas. And there's monographs here, which was tough to grow. It just didn't like the full sun here. There's the 3 maples planted to kind of screen off this house, soften this house some. So this neighborhood has a lot of these sycamores. And if anyone's familiar with the sycamores, they're really dirty. They drop lots of leaves, they get anthracnose, they have a lot of dander, and that stuff gets over everything. And it's a real problem because the plants get dirty and dusty, and that really invites a lot of insects, especially thrip. And it affects me, it affects my breathing. So I wear a mask. It's really, really bad at these trees. And they're just not doing well out here, so I don't know what they can replace them with. So there's a little side garden here that's like a dry garden, and Bill planted a green maple, and he wanted something that kind of grew over the stone and moved to the right. Now, most maples don't grow in this form. So the challenge was, how can we grow a maple that's still really heavily slants left to right and not turn back into a straight tree? And this is all on drip, so it's not going to get overwatered unless they use the drip to put too much water. But that was a challenge. And I was like, I don't know if I've ever done something quite that small before. So this is the back garden. Bill did both at the same time. And there's a lagoon back here. And so he doesn't really have any borrowed scenery. There's some willows, but he has a really big open area, which is good. There will be nothing to encroach on the garden. So I always think of this as the Easter Island rock here. It's kind of like got a face on it. So this is black pine, just very young. And this is a water feature Bill put in that has this all natural stone. Really, really cool. And so you can see the spacing of the plants. They're really kind of, there's open space, allowing them to grow. And here's the wisteria that was trained up to go over the top. And then we got Podocarpus gracilior as the background tree. And this is the red maple. And then he's got Podocarpus machi to grow together as a living wall to screen the hot tub. This is a view from the hot tub across the garden. And this wisteria will be trained over the top and across this beam here. And I think it's called black dragon, some dragon. Just a second here. Okay, so we're about halfway through. So let's see. I guess I better pick up the speed. Okay, so here's the maple tree that was slanting over the rock. And it's going really directional because the garden is a dry garden, really rectangular to the right. So I've been very gently nurturing this thing so it doesn't get too vigorous. But I think eventually we're going to get the top to come down more to the right here. So there it is. So these are just before and afters. About a 10-year-old garden. So this one I left a little fuller. There's a street that T-bones right, a T that goes right with the headlights in the house. They wanted to kind of soften those headlights. And this year, there's just a lot of heat. So I just left a little more foliage on. I didn't do that much thinning. So these three trees are all unique. They'll both have different characteristics. This one is, anyone familiar with the Kamagata cultivar? This one is like Kamagata. This one's a little different, and this one just wanted to be more upright and even gets fall color earlier. So the before and after the back. The pine trees developing. So the bottom branches are starting to develop pretty well. It's starting to hug the stone. And now the next step is get this part to slow down, get more ramification, get a more mature look on the tree. And this is the client, I guess, took a picture of me and I didn't realize. So these are these big spring candles that I'm selectively removing. And when we remove those, we get a second set of growth that's smaller, shorter needles, and smaller internodes. And this is mainly the decanting is mainly a technique to get smaller needles. The thinning in the fall is really the most important. There's another technique of, of pinching some of the candles off in April, but there's a whole pine class offered through Merit program that if you want to learn all the details, definitely look into that. And if all the different series of classes, definitely look into that up at Merritt College in Oakland. Just go to their website. So you can see me, I even got old socks on protecting my arms because I'm actually really sensitive to needles, pine needles poking me. So here's their little water basin. And you see there's a bamboo spout, and now Bill's replaced them with granite post and a copper spout. And there's another slide later on to show more detail of that. So probably this area is a little bit full here, but okay.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. That was an 11-minute break, so glad you had time to get comfortable. Randall's now going to answer, we have 7 Q&A here that are unanswered so far. And Randall, you'll have to unmute yourself. And Randall, you have a number of colleagues in the audience. I know we have an East Coast question, and Nicole LaPlante is participating today, and she's headquartered in upstate New York. Gets cold up there, so I will, if you want to call on her, or she just said hi all, or I see Dina's not here, but Barb Eaton's here, and Bill, and whatever, and so forth. I'll start unmuting some people there, so you can have your little panel if you want to kick it around. So anyway, here comes the first question, then I'll start getting some unmuting going. First question's from Patricia, and she asks, what time of year is best for pruning? Oh, hold on, that's a blower. And good Lord. What time of year is best for pruning Japanese cork maple? We are in Kentucky. Hey, Randall, I can't hear you. Okay, no. Let's see. What happened to Randall? There he is. Ask to unmute.
Can you hear me again now?
Yeah, you're on. So Patricia
Okay.
in Kentucky asks, what time of year is best for pruning Japanese cork maple?
Oh, so I can't see the questions?
I guess not. I'll read them to you.
Okay. So you repeat the question again?
Sure. Patricia, if you're there, would you like to read out your question? Okay, she asks, what time of year is best for pruning Japanese cork maple in Kentucky? She's in Kentucky.
Oh, well, my experience is just mostly in California, and I used to go up in New York and prune on my sister's maple, but is there someone that actually lives on the East Coast that may be better informed on the correct timing? Because in here, like if we want to do a winter pruning, we'll wait till the buds like just start to swell, and then we'll do a pruning there. And then we also do a pruning after the plant has fully leafed out, and that's usually about April or May. And there's another opportunity in the fall, but you have to adjust to your weather conditions. We don't have freezing rain or anything like that, or hard freezes. So if anyone else who lives in Kentucky or in similar weather conditions, maybe they might want to chime in.
That's you, Nikki.
Hi, I can't see myself. But I tend to prune maples in dormancy so that if you prune too late in the spring, and I don't know exactly when dormancy breaks in Kentucky, but in New York, if you trim maples, if you do any pruning on maples, the sap tends to run a lot when they start to come out of dormancy, and so that causes issues with diseases and pests. So I tend to stick to winter.
Okay, that was excellent, Nikki. I just want to chip in. I used to maple sugar in Vermont, and late winter, early spring, the sap flow is very heavy, and that's a sugar tax on the tree. Think of that's what the leaves job is. So you're working against that. Timothy, Nikki?
No, I'm all set.
Okay. Timothy asks, in letting the top of the Japanese pine grow out to take the energy, do you not trim the candles on that part? Randall, that's right up your alley there. So he's talking about
You got to repeat that again. I was a little distracted. Okay, can you repeat it again, Peter?
In letting the top of the Japanese pine grow out to take the energy. So he's talking about the escape leader and subordinating the side branches. Do you not trim the candles on that part, meaning on the escape leader?
I will still do some decandling, yeah, because otherwise it may get too strong. Yeah. In that case, the one example I showed you was I kind of let it grow up because I really didn't know what I was doing, but in the process, it actually worked. So I do something similar now. It's yeah, you can still do some decandling because there's also an aesthetic issue. Probably your client will not like seeing this giant wild growth sticking up on the top, but you have to explain to them what you're doing, and then they'll understand. Otherwise, they're like, why didn't they cut that off? And if you explain to them, it should make sense. So that one was the example I showed was in my early life. I really didn't know, so I probably would have decandled a little bit more to not show that rank growth. But the picture did show a good example of it being pretty much out of control. But yeah, I would still do some decandling on it. I just didn't show all the steps in there.
Okay. A little follow-up question to that would be, Randall, you're doing that for a reason. And are there other reasons for using the escape leader? And when would you cut it out?
The other time you use an escape leader is if you want to get maybe some more taper, fatten up the trunk in that particular area. When I cut it off is determined by the shape and form of the new leader that I'm going to reduce it to. I want to make sure that where I'm reducing the top down to the new leader, I want to make sure that there's enough branches there so when I do make that reduction cut, it does not take off. I don't want it to have some small branches become large again. So that's the determination. So you want to have some ramification. So when you do make that cut, that it will stay small. It will not revert back into tall branches.
Excellent answer. Anyone, if you too have a follow-on question to any of these answers Randall gives, use the Q&A feature. I'm just scrolling down, so we'll get to it. Sue Ellen says, I live in Colorado with a dry climate and need to learn how to prune a character ponderosa pine.
Ponderosa pine. You know, I went to the Japanese garden in Denver. There was a Najka conference there, and the whole garden was full of ponderosa pines. And I don't work on ponderosa pines, so I think that I believe they're like a single flesh pine, so I don't think they're decanted. But I'm by no means the expert on the ponderosa pine. So if there's anyone out there who works with them day in and day out, feel free to add to that.
You might put that in the chat if you do, for everyone's benefit, and then I'll find you in the chat and could turn on your microphone perhaps, and you could engage in a little dialogue with Randall. That'd be fantastic. I know this consumes time, but this is what it's all about. You got a particular interest. Here he is. This is the chance.
I think it may be similar to how you treat the Austrian black pine, because they both can take really cold weather. We were in Grand Rapids, Michigan, working on the Japanese garden, Richard and Helen DeVos Japanese garden, and the Meyer Gardens and Sculpture Park, and they had a lot of Austrian black pines, and they can take the cold. The black pines really suffered, and we mostly did a lot of cutback and thinning. And we went like in August, early September, and do a lot of that work. At some point, they said it gets too cold. They don't do anything. But it's one of those pines where it seems to me, if it's what I call a single flesh, which usually if it grows out in spring, and if you took off that candle, it usually doesn't put another set of growth out. And that's similar to white pines, Austrian black pine, Scots pine. And so if you want to keep one smaller, maybe you would have to do a combination of pinching the spring growth and maybe cutting off to some smaller side growth. But I don't really regularly work with Austrian black pine that much, just occasionally. So probably someone who does that all the time, like the garden, Dave Reddick and Ethan, the gardeners at this garden in Grand Rapids, Michigan, they work there all the time. We never discussed what needed to be done through the season, but there's two gardeners and they've got acres and dozens of trees. And I just look at it, I go, I don't see how they can maintain all these trees. It's a beautiful garden, but there's just so many of them. Even with the Denver Botanical Garden, the Japanese garden there was so many ponderosa pines. It was just, you almost had to choose which ones are going to be your focal trees. And then the background trees, maybe do once a year, once every 2 years. They're just physically impossible to do that many trees in a short amount of time, especially when they're on a hilly garden. It's not just flat where you can just get your ladder and just, go tree after tree.
I recalling doing you remember, Randall, we used to do the white firs at the UC Botanic Garden. This too is a high elevation conifer.
Yeah.
And I can remember our discussion with Dennis Makashima about that, about some high elevation trees are intolerant of a mild winter, such as coastal California, in that they're programmed to be asleep, and you make a pruning cut too late in the season, that cut won't be compartmentalized prior to these warm, wet weather, and that's an invitation to a fungal invasion. So ponderosa pine, of course, native to Colorado, you know, and this brings to mind our treatment of Japanese white pine, another high elevation species. So maybe you and Bill could kick this around, keeping in mind that I think compartmentalization, you know, we're talking 4, maybe 6 weeks to at least get the open ends plugged. And but you know, you guys have both done a lot of these, and in bonsai too, these kinds of single flush, short season conifers.
Well, the white pines are heavy bleeders, so we try not to prune them in the fall. They do bleed a lot, but generally we mostly have the black pine here that, you know, grows the best. The white pine's a little challenging. We in this part of California, we don't have very cold winters. So is there more questions, or do we need to go through the slides, or?
Oh no, but we're doing a high level, in-depth dialogue here. Sue Ellen asked about the ponderosa. I encourage you, Sue Ellen, to follow up if there's anything we missed, or if you can help focus that exploration. There are bonsai practitioners in the San Francisco Bay Area who do ponderosa pines, and they have to send them to winter camp in the Sierra Nevada mountains. So that'd be a fun thing for Randall to expand on if there's time later. Hiromi from the Japan Foundation Global Initiative asks, is there a good or best time of year to prune the maple tree? I have a Japanese maple tree.
Well,
she's in New York City.
So if you're in New York City, it's you know that's an East Coast weather. I just supposed to do the West Coast. So, but for me on the West Coast, if it's mostly for styling, you know, just mostly to thin it out, show off some of the beauty. You know, this is a mature tree. I'll do a spring pruning. That's usually April or May, and sometimes I'll also do some pruning in the fall, and you know, that could be October, November, and in the winter, you know, January, February. In our colder months of December and January, they tend to bleed a lot, and they stop bleeding when the weather gets a little bit warmer. Supposedly, the difference between the day and nighttime temperature, that seems to affect whether it bleeds. And it doesn't tend to bleed very much, like in November or when the buds are soon to open. And that's when I do my major, if it needs restructuring. But if it just needs some pruning, opening up and slightly thinning, I'll do that April, May. But in New York, what you would have to adjust to, maybe Nicole knows more about the timing there.
Well, you nailed it, Randall. What Randall's indicating here is, you know, a lot of us read gardening books and they say, yeah, do this in this day of the year or time of the, you know, this particular month, and that's meaningless outside the author's local area. But as Randall indicated, the Bay Area's sugar season is January. We tend to have cold weather brings clear skies, and since we're on practically on the same latitude as North Africa, you can be wearing a t-shirt in January a lot of times, get a nice sunny day, and then it gets really cold at night because clear skies, no insulation, it gets cold. So that difference in the diurnal temperature fluctuation is huge. And once it gets under, I don't know, 10, 15 degrees difference in fluctuation, more like February in California, you can prune the maple and it won't bleed much. So yeah, so you have to really get to know your own weather, your own historical weather pattern in terms of day and night temperatures, Hiromi, and act accordingly. So Yeah.
So the timing in spring is when the leaves have hardened off. The new growth has hardened off, which means it's slowed down, and that's when it's ready.
Okay. And then, Randall, what about that late summer, autumn pruning you mentioned?
You know, sometimes you get those long whips, so you can cut those off in August. And that's where they call the summer growth is where the tree is growing to get up to its full size. That's when the vigorous, primarily the green maples, will do a second set of growth, or the coral barks, the real vigorous ones do a summer growth. I think I had one slide that showed the coral bark had those summer growth whips, and you know that was a result of the spring pruning.
Okay. There's a wonderful quote from the famous book, The Little Prince, where the fox tells the little prince, "Once you've tamed me, I'm forever yours." Yeah, anyway. Okay, Timothy asks, when Randall says decandling, does he mean removing completely all the candles? You're going to have to explain what a candle is, Randall. Or does he mean selecting candles to leave on the branch and then trimming those candles back?
So candle is, well, the existing picture there, you can see this long cigar-like thing. I don't know if you can see that.
We're talking the pine tree, folks.
Yeah, and it extends out in spring, and then when it comes out like a long cigar, then it opens up with the needles. And so I cut it off at the base. You don't want to cut too deep because you don't want to cut into last year's growth. And when you cut off that candle at the base, then it forces a new set of growth to come out. And a healthy tree can send out multiple buds. One that's not so healthy or really old might just send out one. But it's just a process. Sometimes you leave them on. If it's really small, we don't take them off. We usually take off the large and the medium, and but no really small ones. And all that can be taught in the pruning black pines class. They'll really go into detail. We'll talk about the time of the year, which ones we do, which ones we take off. Maybe we'll take off the areas depending on the strength. 1 week, we'll wait 10 days, do another area, wait another 10 days, do another area. It's all about balancing the strength throughout a tree. They tend to be stronger on the top of the tree and the outer edges, outer branches. And there's a whole different theory on what to do and what you should do it. And every branch is different. So decandling, working pruning pine trees is one of the most difficult trees to learn how to do it properly. You can make it so it still stays alive. From a distance, it looks good, but when you get up close, you can see like, oh, this branch is really weak in here. This one's really strong. You know, it's all about balancing the strength throughout the tree and the branches on the inside, the backside, but that's why there's a whole class. And I don't know if you want to spend, you know, it better be just you really want to really learn it in depth. Is take the class on pruning pines.
Cool. All righty. I just put something in the chat box about that so people can find that on the internet. Let's see. Let's see. Timothy asks, he's leaving. Will the Q&A be posted somewhere? Everything's being recorded. The chat box, transcript, the audio and visual, it's all going to eventually be posted on YouTube. The channel's not up yet, but I'm going to get to that soon. And then we just have to edit out all our computer mishaps and wasted time while we figure out Zoom. And then it'll get posted. And you can check in. As I put in the chat box, you can just email jpnliven at Gmail, and eventually I'll have that on the auto response. And it's going to be a little more difficult to extract everyone's email address and send out a mass emailing. So, but we'll give this a chance. And we, speaking of chance, Mr. Frank Chance is going to offer a another Zoom webinar on the Japanese style living environment, I believe on Saturday, October 25th. And Frank, if I got that wrong, please speak up. It should. And anyway, so Frank is next up on the Q&A, and he's mentioning that in Philly they are pruning their maples in January, December. Saturday, October 17th. Okay, Frank Chance's class is Saturday, October 17th, 10 a.m. Eastern Time is 1 p.m. Pacific Time. And we don't have a formal write-up posted yet, but these are his class. Sorry for the interruption here, Randall. Frank's class is going to be on the meaning that people have brought to their unique way of life as it evolved in the Japanese style living environment. So call it words to live by, or the philosophy of the Japanese style living environment. We haven't settled on a title, but I think you get the drift. And check in now and then by just sending some kind of a email to jpnliven, jpnliven at gmail.com, and by and by you'll get the auto reply with the details. Okay, Frank also asked, has your pruning this year been affected by wildfires and smoke? Aesthetics of the Japanese living environment, or some such. Good title, Frank. Let's go with that. Hey, Randall, you hear me? Has pruning this year been affected by wildfires and smoke?
Well, I certainly have been. I've never had to deal with this much ash on trees. I'm trying to wash them off. Whether we'll have any adverse reactions, I'm not sure, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm always wearing a mask anyway due to the COVID-19, but the amount of debris on the leaves cannot be good. And you can't even wash this stuff off.
Has anyone asked?
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Randall.
Okay, because something about my internet connection came up and said it was unstable. Okay, so it was really interesting. There was one day it was so dark, even at 11 a.m. It was too dark to prune without a headlamp. But hopefully it won't have much of an effect. But you know, if you're coating the leaves with stuff, you know, the stomata obviously are affected. But I'm thinking like we'll have to see. But I've been just trying to have everyone wash their plants off with water. But I haven't seen anything directly yet so far.
An anonymous attendee asks how to prune a bonsai hinoki. This is Chamaecyparis obtusa, folks. So, yeah, kind of a question of a different scale, Randall. It's a bonsai hinoki.
Well, on hinokis, you can only prune back as far as there's foliage, and it's specifically a nice growing tip. Sometimes the foliage inside will still be green, but there's no actual live growing tip. If you prune back that far, the branch will die back. They don't really bud back on the bare wood. They bud back on the crotch of the branch, but not usually where there's bare wood, at least in America. I don't know about in Japan, but in America. And so when you're pruning them, you know, they grow in a fan, so you have to try to keep that line, but you got to cut back the fan back some. And that's where you like to cut the middles out, but as long as you keep some foliage on the branch with growing ends, they tend to be more strong on the top and the outer branches. But I think this is really challenging to describe and to do without showing. I mean,
do you have a photo of the old devil-horned hinokis at Kohanen that we fixed? through collar sprout out in your slideshow?
I don't think so.
Oh, all right.
I don't think. I mean,
Maybe you can just use your cursor and.
I've got some hinoki on this garden, some upcoming slides,
Oh, great.
but really not bonsai.
All right. Well, you know, it's the same technique. It's a little different.
No.
Okay. Well, you might mention pruning the roots then for the bonsai. Mark asks, what time of year do you prune walnut trees in the foothills of California?
I don't know. I don't prune walnut trees. I'm sorry.
All right. All right. Well, maybe we'll get something going in the chat box on that one. Jocelyn, our colleague here in the Bay Area, asks, also, we have to remember climate change. There is weather and climate. It is changing not just every year, but every season. Jocelyn, you can pipe up and unmute yourself here. Randall?
Yeah, it's I've been doing this like for I've always been gardening. Since I was a little kid, I followed my grandfather around. He didn't really speak English. He spoke Chinese, and I'd follow him around. So I guess I was just meant to be out in gardens working. But over the years, I've noticed there's a lot more temperature extremes, a lot more disease and insects specifically, a lot more sunburn. I mean, we've had hail damage, all kinds of more things that can cause damage to our plants. And that's only in the last, like for me, I'm 60, and I'm seeing stuff, really hot days that I didn't used to see. So more stress on the trees, definitely.
Okay.
Peter, did you want me to pipe in?
Yeah, Jocelyn, you might want to develop that question a bit more, or?
Well, it wasn't a question. It was a comment, and it just is. I mean, the field of arboriculture is dealing with that a lot, and watching what's happening. As Randall said, there's a lot more pests, a lot more diseases. The timing of when bud break is changing, and so you can't go by a calendar. So it's really important to be observing what's going on more and more and stay on top of the pests and diseases.
Yeah, Jocelyn, yeah, you really have to adjust. You have a guideline, but you really have to adjust by what's happening. And I think that's where your person with experience can deal with that, because like we can prune things out of season, but you do have to adjust. It's constantly evolving. We're going to, like earlier, fall color. If you know you're more in a drought, maybe you're going to take less off of the tree. All these things that you just have to take into account. You just can't go through a garden and goes, well, this is what I want to do to make it look pretty. There's a lot of other factors involved, and you explain that to a client. Like, well, how come you didn't take off as much this year? He says, well, we're going through a drought. You don't want to stress the plant anymore. Why are you doing this? I go, well, if you thin it out too much, this part could sunburn, and there's all these factors, and it definitely makes it a lot more challenging.
For the benefit of folks from out of the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area historically has been the transition zone between a sort of a mild, rainy, temperate climate from Oregon, Washington, and the Pacific coast of Japan, for that matter, that kind of vegetation. And at the same time, we've always had a component of what really more the vegetation of Mexico. And we're seeing with our increasing heat and drought, we can have drought. The most recent one was a 5.5 year drought or something. We're seeing a vegetation change, and that's why California and the Northwest are burning because the climate is not favorable to Japanese maples, flowering cherries, even walnuts are feeling a bit of stress, and ginkgo. Those are pretty rugged deciduous plants. So in this context, and with increasing population, there's less and less water to irrigate with. Randall is facing an increasing challenge, Jocelyn, everyone here, Bill, who plants these gardens. So in the spirit of Bill's mentioned, often he works in gardens where he's not just using the species of Japan, but he's putting in more locally appropriate vegetation. That goes for our friend in Colorado with ponderosa pine and everything. We have to remember that these temperate plants are retreating uphill or up north and so forth. Okay, great discussion. And let's see, Hiromi is thanking us for the in-depth discussion of her question of maple in New York and everything else. Timothy asks, I think I heard Randall saw Austrian black pines are said Austrian black pines are single flush, likely, and therefore they won't send out secondary candles. So Randall, you might want to just define single and double flush and multi-flush pines for everybody, and the implication for, by the way, Randall, describe what a candle is too.
Well, I don't know if I got this picture with the cursor. That's the long candle. If I can get another picture with a bigger candle on it, let's see if I, let's see. Oh, well. Well, I'd have to go on another slide and I have to figure out what that is. But it's just that long, narrow cigar thing that comes off the branch in the spring. Oops. But as far as single flush, these are general terms. So what is this? A single flush generally means the pine tree will put out one flush of growth in the spring. And if you remove it, it won't usually put out another set of growth. It may put out a bud. That's if you do it at a certain general time. Now, if you take it off early, it could still put something out. But let's just say if it's already opened up and then you cut it at that time, not if you take it off really early, because it'll do something different. The double flush, or like generally it's the black pine, they'll grow out that long candle, and you can remove it after it starts, the needles have opened up, and you can remove it, and like a month later the buds will start to form and a new set of growth comes out that will be shorter. The one pine that we have in California that grows native to the coast is the Monterey pine, and that one you can actually cut like in March, you can cut again in May, you can cut again in July, and it'll keep sending out another set of growth. It's a very, very strong, vigorous tree, supposedly not very long lived in nature, maybe 75, 90 years. But there's one at the Bonsai Garden in Oakland that is pretty old, and it always has young branches because they're always doing work on it. And it's planted on a mound and seems to be quite happy. So some single flush ones are like white pine, Scots pine, and the Austrian black pine. They usually just put out that one growth in spring, and if you cut them off, they don't put out another set. I tried it in my early years with the Scots pine, and I was like, oh yeah, it's a pine. Why don't I just decandle them? Well, they just put buds out, if that, at the bottom of where you cut it. And so that one is more of a, you pinch the spring growth and do some cut back. I thought I had a slide of the Scots pine, but that might be buried somewhere way down the line here. But so that's just kind of a brief overview.
That's great. I encourage everyone to keep filling up the Q&A. We'll get to this hopefully at the end of Randall's presentation. Randall, it's, let's see, according to this, you only got half an hour to go. So why don't you just buzz on through the slides now, and we'll promise
Yeah,
to
because
let you.
I have like 100 something more at least to go through. So I guess I'll just be brief on some of them.
Okay, everyone
this
else,
garden-
let's everyone else, like Jocelyn, myself, Nikki, we'll just mute or not, but you know, just to keep the
Okay.
background noise down.
Well, I don't know if anyone wants to stay later or what, but I could go through these quickly, and you know, I'll gladly answer other questions if you have any.
All right.
Yeah, but I mean, I'll just go through these pretty briefly. I kind of went over the other ones pretty thoroughly. So this is
Randall's
a garden.
willing to stay late, and for those of you who have to leave, just remember it will be recorded and so forth. Nikki LaPlante raised her hands. Nikki, go ahead and just speak up if you have something to say. Okay. All right, Randall, take it away.
Okay, so this is a garden in the Oakland Hills, grown in serpentine soil, and there used to be a big, gorgeous old apple tree here that kind of grew over here like a semi-cascade, really beautiful, directional. Then the neighbor cut the root and it died. So this garden was originally Mark Miyasato designed, and then Masu Mizumi had some influence, and then eventually Bill Castellan came on. So this is like the early stages here. And then this is what it looks like now. This pine tree used to be way in the back, right there. It's now here. And so Bill put in a dry stream that meanders off down the hill, and it utilizes the natural oaks. So there's this transition. So there's oaks on the hill here that blends in with the oak. So it's like a Japanese garden that blends in with what's existing in nature. So front view. Bridge Bill put in. And that's just the back part. And then this is the latest addition, a little seating bench Bill put in. It's more of a screening tree from the neighbor, big red maple. And this is the bottle brush that kind of a focal point when you're down here in the meadow. This is just a side entrance to the garden, a really old Satsuma plum. And this is the owner's pine tree that's been in a container for a long time. This one I thought was just interesting because we wanted something to soften this wall, but I liked how the shadow played on the driveway. These stones, I think, were originally placed by Masu Mizumi. His trademark is the blue colored foliage on a plant. This is a big Hollywood juniper in the front of the house that eventually got thin, and the exposure is off. Sorry about that. And this is the view from the front door. Really quite interesting. You see all the furrows in the bark? Really quite interesting, I think. It's just a Lauropelum, kind of a Tamamono that is actually a little bit more open in person, but it's really great branch structure inside. This is a garden out in Pleasant Hill, pine tree, another Bill Castellan garden. And you can see how it both leads you right to left, and this one's left to right toward the front door. So the garden. This is actually a corkbark pine. It came from Isley Nursery. And when we took a tour there with the American Conifer Society, we actually got to go out on a tour there, which was quite interesting to see them growing in actually in the boxes out there. And I don't see them anymore. They might have sold out, but this is a corkbark black pine. This upper close-up view. This is a back garden put in. And so this is the water basin. So here's the the granite posts and the copper that Bill's been replacing now. And so I try to prune the maples and all the foliage here, just kind of like soften the whole scene. You know, maybe wraps around this post a little bit, goes around the stone, soften the stone. Just a really nice, comfortable feeling. So this can be viewed right from their family room window. And this is almost like in a way, almost like a stroll garden. It's a very long, flat, rectangular garden, but there are so many areas you can just walk to and sit down if you like to read or just enjoy nature. It gets really hot in the summer though, but there is a lot of shade put in. This is a garden in Alameda. That was actually appropriate for the picture from the 90s. She said that these irises were supposed to have been brought all the way from Japan. I don't know. There's no way. Maybe the DNA test. But and she liked the flower color white at the time. So there's a new owner now, and the garden is changed quite a bit. It needs probably some renovation. And this was the front. And so everything is viewed from the window, kitchen window, office window. So even though it's all meant to be viewed from the front, it is also viewed from inside. But it's not really a courtyard garden. And so they wanted to upgrade it. It used to be lawn out here, and Bill comes in and starts putting all these big giant boulders in. And we put the Mexican pebbles, just kind of soften this edge. So without the lawn, supposedly we use less water. It's just in the formation stages. This is a tree got back in 1994 from LA when my cousin got married, and it was just kind of a stick, and we grew it up to this. So this is awaiting. That's the summer growth right there. It's been decandled. Those are the summer growth poking its head up. This is just a green cedar. I think I got it originally from a 1 gallon can. So I just gave it a thinning. And hopefully no one's asleep like my cat. So this is a condominium complex. So they wanted kind of an Asian theme. And so we suggested, you know, maybe some bamboo. And I talked to Bettinary, one of my longtime clients, and she knows a lot about bamboo. So we thought about putting different varieties of bamboo in this courtyard, 3-story condo, so they could sit here and give more of a peaceful feeling. And since this is a rooftop, you can't plant anything in the ground. It all has to be in pots. So it's an attempt to create a better living environment. You see all the big windows. There you can sit here without everyone looking down on you, and also keep down the heat. This is an apartment complex, and the owner loves Japanese style gardens. So this used to be a row of camellias that she wanted to re-landscape. So eventually she was going to re-landscape the whole lawn into like maybe a giant stroll garden that Bill was going to do, but then she changed her mind. I think it would have been gorgeous to have a big stroll garden in here. But so they put in a dry stream on this end here. And there's a nice patio with the maple and the tenants like to come out here and relax. Sometimes have barbecue. It's just different views of the garden. That's where it ends up in a lake and it flows out the back. This is viewing from the patio itself. Pine tree in training stages. So it was a lot taller, and now I'm going to slowly reduce it, and it might go down to maybe here, and then the head will be right there. And then slowly developing these branches. So it's a process. It doesn't happen right away. This is a new one. One pine tree died, and I found this one at a local nursery that grows things for bonsai stock, but this one can't be made into a bonsai because it's gotten too big and the branches aren't in the right places. So I bought it to train for a landscape tree. And so this is after its one pruning. starting to develop the pads where I want the branches and maybe still let it grow a little taller. This is a big red maple she has. This is a back garden. There's a green maple here. So the white rock is not my favorite, but that's what they did at the times. Old garden, pine tree. And the challenges of curating these gardens. Plant dieback. Oak root fungus, I found it was killing the junipers. Killed the camellias. Killed the loropetalum. Killed the mugo pine. So we're gonna have to plant things that are resistant to oak root fungus. And this is a big giant oak tree right here. This life-leaf maple, someone was moving and dropped a big piece of furniture on it. Snap the whole thing clean off. Construction workers think that the dry riverbed should be a place to do their sawdust, cut their wood. It's unbelievable. This tree was topped because they thought it was too big. So this is a process of me trying to grow it back out again. I had to let these branches run to try and get taper again, and then eventually just get it down to 2. I mean, you're always going to see this scar, but oh, this is the beginning of the oak root fungus. Irrigation problems. It's sometimes I put on my irrigation cap and fix the irrigation. And the other hazard is sometimes you fall into the pond. You see where I fell all the way up to here, backwards, totally soaked. Good thing it was a pretty warm day, and I wear the hat because they're near a golf course and golf balls run into the yard. So that's another hazard. But yeah, I got completely wet. This is another garden in Alameda. Bill did this a long time ago. He was working mostly by himself and maybe with his sister. Put in a dry stream area. I put the pathway in. So this pine tree has a really pronounced slant. So I'm trying to grow it back up so it's a little bit taller. The green cedar was added later. And the blue atlas, weeping blue atlas cedar was added later. And this is a weeping red pine, which used to stay upright farther, but it started to slant. So we put a redwood brace post here. It should have been like over here. And the homeowner here loves weeping trees. There's more weeping pines, cedars, everything in any other garden I work at. This one's in Mill Valley. This one, the homeowner likes to grow prune a lot of the pine trees or work with me to learn how to prune. Another Bill Castellan garden. He's everywhere. And this is a pine tree I think she grew, it might be from 1 gallon can. We work with it. And so we decided to put it on this side of the stone, and there's another one here. Just kind of soften the stone. And this used to be all low growing ground covered junipers, but due to being in a fire zone, she removed them all and is going to replace them with maples to kind of drape over the wall here and soften it.
Hey, Randall,
Yep.
I want you to know, I'm thinking 2 or 3 slides back, the extremely slanting pine that you're training up, right behind a big Gogon rock on some dry stream. I just wanted you to know that not only is Bill here, and I know you guys do tree and stone arrangements and bonsai, but Vincent Covolo's in the audience too, and he's like Felix. He wrote a really great book on Suiseki. So you're playing in the big league, my friend.
Oh. Yeah. So this one actually laid over more after it was planted. It's just interesting. It's almost like someone came and stepped on it, but in person it doesn't look quite as slanted. And these are the red pines that they've been growing. So
I was I was curious how much you like to exploit the opportunity to relate your plant material to other objects such as stones, and obviously windows, ponds, that sort of stuff.
Oh, yeah. So this one is the red pine. We do decandle these. There's double flush. And this seems to be, this one's way happier than the one in Danville. I don't know why. Just some more maples going in the early stages. This is actually a variegated black pine, originally grown by Jimmy Inadomi. That's my friend's uncle who had a nursery in Cache Valley. And he grew tons of plants. He just loved it. He was still planting seed in his 80s. And so this one is, it kind of mimics the stone, the trunk, follows the outline of the stone. And there's some straps. Generally, you don't always have to use straps. But in this case, this one already has lots of movement. We just want to bring the branch down lower. So there is movement underneath here. If you just use straps and tie a branch, it tends to be kind of straight, but this one already has movement. So the strap is okay for this particular example. This is a garden in Kensington, California that Dina Blackman and I both work on. There is so much to prune here. If you did it myself, I'd be here for weeks. Everything is really pruned to a really high definition. The owner really likes that. And it is time consuming, but she really loves, she's a really great client. I mean, we were just allowed to do it, and she just doesn't care. I mean, do it right. Several other Merit Pruning Club or APA people have pruned here in the past. I've been doing this for maybe, I don't know, it could be 10 years or more. Or longer. This is juniper. There used to be 3 giant big pads. So we broke them up into several pads to show up the trunk line a little bit better. So this garden has some really old conifers. It's got to be well over 50 years old. At least that's old in my opinion. Old contorted cypress. Just old. There's lichen. I mean, it's just crazy. There's a lot of deer in this neighborhood, so this maple takes a beating every year. I think Masu Mizumi, who is a well-renowned landscaper, he used to prune here. And so it's like carrying on his legacy. And this is a really wild Podocarpus gracillus or fern pine. And this was one of his trademarks, is he would grow it and create all this wild movement. Absolutely incredible. And this is the entrance. And there's just a window on top, glass on top, and a lot of shade. So the challenge is to keep this one alive, because it's way down in the most shadiest area, this branch here. But without it, you just see all this branch. There'd be nothing to soften it. Really interesting movement. So we've mostly been maintaining it. Moss gets all the credit for actually forming that structure. That's a view of the backyard. Dennis Makashima takes care of the bonsais. This is an umbrella pine, one of the oldest umbrella pines that I work on. Really interesting bark. It's a Cyadopetus, not actually a pine. This is a really, I think, a gorgeous black pine that my teacher, Dennis Makashima, came in, and it was a huge head before, and he made a huge cut. Up here, there must be a cut, what, 5 inches? You see, he totally restructured it. Of course, the client, I think, went into shock, but it's just absolutely such a stately, beautiful tree. This is the hooligan maple, as Yuki Nara calls them, the ones that are hard to control. And this is after I pruned it. I prune this one 3 times a year because it sprouts, sprouts, and sprouts. This is just some examples of pine trees. This one's growing in deep shade, so the needles are really long, and there's competition from the redwood tree. So it's got some scale issues. This is one that I think Dina Blackwell prunes this garden out. I trained this one from a 1-gallon can, and she had a space here that there's a lot of other dwarf conifers in her garden, so I thought, well, this would fit in just right, by the front steps. This is Austrian black pine at the garden in Grand Rapids, Michigan. This is a red pine. So there's just various pines, weeping red pine. There's a Monterey pine trained in this style, very vigorous. White pine, a dwarf white pine. Now this is my garden with that big flax, definitely out of scale. So I put in a Reusen, weeping green maple, and of course my ladder. So this is what you get when you are a pruner. You get a strange garden. This is a garden I inherited from the previous owner, but it's got a nice water feature, attracts lots of birds. Reconstruction and restructuring. So I'm going to show some examples of trees that were just really wildly overgrown. So this is a canal that's really open, really big, spread open. So I went and thinned out all the dead needles and thinned it out, brought back the separation to all the pads. So there is a big change, but a lot of this was there. You just had to expose it. This one was a Japanese garden that probably hasn't been pruned in about 7 years. And you can still see the stones, and there was a dry stream that ran across the front, across the pathway. So I tried to, restructure this. So I did so much at that one time. I also judged, how healthy it is. You can see this branch is kind of weak, but if I didn't do some of the top, we're going to lose the bottom because pine trees are top dominant. And so this is closer to the front. So you can start to see the line in the trunk again. And I just tried to bring it back to scale. But when you're reducing a pine tree or restructuring, you usually only have, at least in where I live in the Bay Area, you only have usually maybe a 5-year window, because at some point the tree gets so strong on the end or the top that you just get these oversized trunks or side branches. And this one went 7 years. So there's just only so much I could do. Ideally, when there was a lot of the Japanese gardeners were retiring or just couldn't do it anymore, there was a lot of trees to try and salvage. And now at this point, well, this one, it was the owner's father that used to do the pruning, but that he couldn't do it. So this is a garden out in Lafayette. And there's still a landscape maintenance company, but the company that prunes them, he stopped doing the pruning. So it looks like it was like 3 years no one's done any pruning. So I came in to open this back up. Of course, the backside actually got sunburned and died off. And then it was buried too deep with the mulch. I exposed that. Oh, not a very good picture. So this is a garden in Oakland. And I did the first pruning. I'm sorry for the picture, it just didn't come out very good. So I took off a lot. And sometimes clients, when they see that, they're like in shock, and then I have to give them the oxygen tank and mask for the amount of pruning. But so this is like a few years later. The pads have now started to develop, and it's starting to look like a much older tree now. This is actually one of my first gardening clients, way back in 1988, 89. So this is like restructuring a podocarpus. Initially open up, see the trunk, try to remove unnecessary leaders out of the top. Just initial pruning. This is, I think this is actually a pine tree that was, they just kind of kept cutting the top. So they asked me, what can you do with this? I said, well, what I can do is thin it out, clean out the needles, and hopefully get it to bud back some, but get rid of this diamond shape if possible. So the first step was just to thin it all out and let the light and air in, and not make it look so heavy. But you can see all this part is gone. There's no branch that's going to form there unless you graft or remove the bark and hope some buds pop out. This is a lace leaf maple in a container. So this is initial pruning just to open it up, clean up the line. So you can still see this one's kind of strong here, but it was just initial pruning, and eventually you come back and you could simplify it some more. But it's when a deciduous tree should look really good when the leaves are off. When you hear people say, "Oh, it'll look good when the leaves come back on," well, that's not a sign of a good pruner. It should still look good even when the leaves are off. This is, I think this is in San Rafael. I think Maggie Hoppy works here now. So this is a weeping blue-headed cedar that was, you can see it's grown wild into the driveway, over the neighbor's shrub. It's all over the ground. And so I came by, and this is actually just one pruning. It was amazing. All this stuff was underneath the tree, and it was quite fun to do this one. So this one was a red lace leaf maple. Was going to get off the pathway from the house. The front door is over here to the left. So open it up, show off this leading line branch that leads to the front door. It goes just across the lantern a little bit, and the pathway, but you just see the movement of all the trunks and the branches. This is the gigantic Hollywood juniper down in San Jose. And it was a massive job. But in San Jose, you can put the stuff on the street and they collect it. You don't have to haul it. And so it pruned it back, open it up, see the structure. And then it also like this. You can really see how dramatic this is. A lot of fun, but a massive job all day. And this is a waterfall in the the Richard and Helen DeVos Japanese Garden in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And this is the before picture. This waterfall and garden was designed by Hoichi Kurusu. And I always liked those waterfalls. And so this is after it's been pruned. There was Greg Kitajima, I think, worked on this one. I think Grant worked on a tree up here. Marianne Lewis worked on the maple here. And I don't know what Emily worked on. I think I worked on something on the side here. This is when a group of us went to the garden there. We had met Dave Reddick and Ethan at a NACHA conference, and I guess they made contact with Marianne and Grant first and see if we were interested in coming out and spend a week pruning. So we did do that. Marianne Lewis was the second president of the APA. I followed her. There's Greg working on a big Austrian. There's Marianne Lewis. There's Grant working on a big Austrian black pine. And there's Emily Frankowiak, one of our newer certified members. She got certified the same time as Nicole LaPlante back in Portland when they had the conference. Was that 2018? Yeah. And she's from Michigan. So it can be done. And so this is the garden in Lafayette again. This is a Scots pine. So this is a candle completely grown out. So you can tell that I'm here in winter, so I got to come here and, I need to really restructure these trees. I mean, they're just totally grown out. And so after thinning them, you can see the structure again. It's usually a certain amount of process, so when I go to a garden, you look at it, okay, what do they want? What can be done now? I look at what time of the season it is, and what's the long-term plan. So initially, it's winter, so you can do a lot of work, a lot of big cuts on the conifers, and initial plan was to cut back a lot of this wild overgrowth, and what you can without still making it look somewhat nice. So sometimes if there's a branch I want to remove, but I can't because I'll leave too big of a hole. But initially go for all the really coarse overgrown pieces and simplify it. And now's the time to start nurturing the branches you want to keep, because if you wait too long, those branches inside will die off. So this is a garden in San Mateo, and it's not really a Japanese style garden, but it reminds me so much of a Suki living garden because just the way it is. It's a courtyard garden, and it's just a little postage stamp, but she's just a really excellent gardener as far as maintaining everything in here. And so this is a red lace leaf maple that's right by her walkway and deck. And so to keep it in size, I just thinned it out, and she can see it while she's sitting over here looking out the window of the front door, and she also can see it as she walks in through her entryway. So it's surrounded by a wall, very much like what I saw in Japan, and it's just this quiet, peaceful place. It's a joy just to be there. And the birds like hanging out there. She has a bird feeder. Very nice. I mean, I think this is kind of the essence you would strive for, even though it's not a Japanese style garden. This is the ubiquitous Mugo pine that's pretty old. This one's like really bad color. And but even then, a Mugo pine, you can show off the movement of the branches and the structure, and it can be quite a beautiful tree too. Okay, this is in Kensington, California, and this is a green maple that just grows like a weed every year, and that's Nancy Buell, who at the time was helping me with this garden, and she is the first person ever to be certified, to become a certified pruner by the APA. She'll always have that distinction, and she passed with flying colors, and so she's up there with her hard hat and and figuring out what to do. And I'm always working on the inside, climbing up the tree and pruning the middle. And that's the after look. So these are really old trees, and there've been many people who've pruned them, and I just think I'm the present caretaker. And this is a El Cerrito pine. This is the old El Cerrito Hall, black pine. And this project was led by Dennis Makashima with the Merritt College Pruning Club. And this is what he started with. And there's all of us pruning away. And I think that's Peter Boyer right there. And Austin, and I don't know where I am. But so there we're starting to do the reduction. And this is the finished project. And I've always thought there's craft and there's art. And it's like pruning it to its essence. And this tree looks so ancient. And I've always thought this is art. And I think aesthetic pruners strive to reach art. It just looks old and ancient. Branches hanging down, the movement of the burnt trunk and the bark, and it just got so much interest and character. And it's in an area where it's by sidewalks where people can rip off branches. It's been gone. They put the new city hall up, and it's gone. Sadly, it's no more. So this is at Shinzen Garden in Fresno, California, and Dennis was asked to redo their pine trees, black pines. So he says, well, I give him 2.5 years, and that's his plan. And he comes in and he leaves. And so this is what it came out after we worked on it a few times. And sadly, it died because they wouldn't water. In Fresno, which gets to 100-some degrees, they didn't water. This was when I took a trip to Japan. And this is a garden that I've never seen a pine tree trained like this. It didn't take me 2 photographs, and they grew it out like a big hand stretched out. I just had to take pictures to show how it was. And that's Jonas of Bonsai Tonight fame, bonsai guy. This is just a garden tree in Japan. So as far as like when you're styling a tree, go ahead, take pictures. See trees that you like, and take pictures and then follow it. See what it looks like. I'm sorry this picture didn't turn out very clear, but I'd love to have this in my backyard. Looks like a white pine here and a bunch of black pines. Some nice boulders, Tamamono shrub. This was at a private residence, and it's a huge black pine that suppose this guy owned pachinko parlors, and he claimed that you could see his Satsuki azaleas, the Japanese azaleas with the multiple colors. He could say if you fly over an airplane, you could see his yard. I think he was a very wealthy guy. Another garden in someone's private garden. And so back to those original 3 bonsais I had. I guess I got the disease going. So this was way back in 1984, 1986. And this is them now. I still have these 2, the Saguaro cypress and the green cedar. So all those years of nurturing makes these trees become these trees. Now this one's still got to do some more wiring, but like, of course I've had a little help on the way and guidance and styling, but 30 some years. So it's similar to a garden tree. It's so important to do the maintenance and what your plan is for the future. And if you don't know, ask someone, join a network, and take workshops. Really important to always expand your knowledge. You know, I don't consider myself an expert. I'm always willing to learn. Always want to learn, learning more every year. And I also like to do tray landscapes. You know, I can't, you know, I let Bill move the big rocks, but I like to play with smaller ones. This is supposed to be like my stream coming out into another stream or a lake. Little cryptum area, some old tufa rock here. And I also like to do rock plantings. You know, it's something that grows in the wild. I have a more up-to-date picture. I just didn't have time to take it. And then I just want to close up with some gardens that, some nice Japanese-style gardens. This one is at Oasis in, let's see, I know right now, it's in Sonoma County, I believe. Michael
It's
Gallagher.
osmosis.
Osmosis, what did I say?
You said oasis.
Oh, osmosis, I'm sorry. It's
Very
an oasis.
Freudian. Good for you.
Thanks, Peter. It's osmosis, yeah, and it's
Occidental California.
Occidental, okay. And Michael Gallagher has worked there for decades, right? The APA had a tree walk, and we went there with Michael as our guide with the owner, and it was really great. And it was an overcast day, which really makes, I think, gardens look much nicer.
Look at the exquisite rhythm of Tamamono shrubs snaking through that garden. That's incredible.
Wow. And this has been built up over the years. And so I thought, I love it, the reflection and I think Michael spends, what, 1 day a week here, I think. It's incredible. And this is the garden in Grand Rapids, Michigan again. It's a bridge. The Austrian black pine that I showed earlier was this one. The challenges of working on a Japanese garden, because you're working on cliffs. Emily, I think, was pruning this maple, and if she slipped, she was going off into the water. And I think Dave Reddick said that one time he did fall in the water, and someone commented, "Wow, that was a big fish," but it was actually him falling into the lake. It was funny. And this is the Portland Japanese garden, which is, I guess, considered the best public garden in the United States. I finally had I was able to get up here back in 2018, something like that, I think. Such an old, beautiful red lace leaf. Oh man. And just this beautiful movement. It's just gorgeous. That's just the look of age. You cannot duplicate this just through pruning. it takes time. Yeah. And this is another Hoichi Kurusu design waterfall. And when you hear it running, oh, it's just heavenly. I just had to sit here and admire just the way that they made everything look so natural here. All the branches, just gorgeous. Going around the stones. It just looks like something you see in nature. And that's it. That's the sunset.
Randall, the accolades are pouring in as some people have to leave. You really ought to read the chat stream here. You're a hit, and you stimulated a lot more questions too. Not that many more, but the kudos are just flowing. The tide of gratitude is rising. What can I say?
Oh, well, hopefully no one was bored.
So, do you have time to answer a Q&A or two, Randall?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, everybody, start typing. So, Nicole LaPlante says, getting back to Mrs. G's garden, Randall,
Yeah.
you mentioned the sawdust in the dry water feature. That was
Yeah.
the gravel stream, everybody. Leaves and eroded soil contaminate the dry stream beds I work in. What are some approaches you've taken to clean the stone, and which is the most successful technique?
Well, you know, that one with the sawdust in there, that's Mexican pebbles, and that has an underlayment. And I know like that's really kind of frowned on because basically any kind of living thing underneath it won't live because there's just no, they can't come for oxygen. But that one does have a barrier, and in that place the association have gardeners that blow it out, and there has been that much buildup in that one. But I do notice that can be a real problem in many gardens, and I've seen people use blowers. I think you could do that. That will delay the process of it filling in, but eventually you're going to have to clean it out and put new gravel in. And it's going to be labor intensive, but I think it's part of that thing you have to do to enjoy it. I think one of the gardens, like the garden, this is G's, a dry stream, the gardener blows it out once a week, but I can see stuff starting to build up in it. So at some point we can add a new layer, but at some point we'll probably have to scoop it out, clean it out, and put new gravel. And so she'll probably get some labor to do that, and we'll just get a new load of gravel. But even at my mom's house with the so-called dry lake, it is really filled up, and I haven't gone to the point yet of changing it, but I'm gonna have to dig it out and put a new fresh layer of gravel.
I could chime in there. I had a customer with a gravel path that filled with dirt, Nicole, and we, he didn't want to just throw it out and buy new rocks, so we had to set up a ramp like a sieve or a riddle, right, on a 45-degree angle. So, depending on the scale of the project, but this was a large path, kind of English flower border situation. And the idea was to shovel up this mixture of dirt and pebbles, pour it at the top of it. Think of a slide in a children's playground, only the slide's built out of some kind of a mesh or sieve, like 2 2x4s with some screen material in between. You dump the stone at the top. By the time the stone rolls to the bottom, all the dirt's fallen through the sleeve. Then if you're really bright, you have the stone rolling into some kind of a, concrete mixing tub or something that you can pick up one load at a time and return to the path area or into a wheelbarrow or some such. That's a lot of heavy labor. But
Yeah, that's a good idea, Peter, because I did do that for a yard that had bigger aggregate, but and I waited for it was dry, so I just shoved it against the screen. The dry stuff fell through, and then I just did a wash. But the smaller gravel, you're gonna have to use a hose and wash it out probably. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely that would be another method. Yeah, you could put like a big sifter and then wash the water through and just catch the debris. But you know, at Mrs. G's, I think the dry stream is like 100 feet. It's a long, long dry stream. Oh, the stream I covered was designed with 3 grades of size. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm thinking it's going to be time consuming no matter what method you use. I'm just thinking like, you know, what's the cost? Yeah, if you just rip it all out and put all new, but yeah, depending on how the dry stream looks, yeah, because there could be, like Nicole wrote down, you could have different sizes and it's how you place it.
well, Randall, how about pressure washing for Nicole's situation?
Well, but if there's debris underneath the stone, pressure washing just kind of moves it around.
At least for the dirt.
Yeah, you can push it down to the bottom, which is short term. At Bet's garden, the Open Hill, she had gophers coming up, so she just paid someone like the gardener to remove the dirt and set the stone back down. And but hers are like bigger stones, so you wouldn't really see the dirt as much. But I think this dry streaming reds, which are just more of a meandering, collect a lot more junk, provided you know there are the trees on top. But you know, my mom's garden is built in the 80s, and there's barely a level of gravel off the top. It's just broken down for so many years. I mean, it still looks okay, but right underneath, it's a lot of fines. So what I've been probably will plan to do is I'll rake off the coarser stuff and I'll scoop up the old stuff, and you know, maybe I will have to just dump it because it's basically like fines. You sift out, if you're sifting bones, so it's just like the fines underneath, and maybe I'll just try to remove some of it instead of all of it.
Yeah, Nicole's followed up with quite a few further things in the chat. I'm going to try and put her on mic again. Because there's...
Use a blower, yeah. Huge dust cloud.
Yeah, everyone can, some of that she's just sent to us panelists, so I'm going to try and get her. Where'd she go? Nicole, you want to unmute yourself? She signed out. Where's she? There she is. Ask to unmute.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, Nicole, a lot of your chats just went to the panelist. It's the default setting. So you want to catch the whole audience up on the fine points?
So well, you got the essence of there's different grades of gravel in this stream bed to capture, in theory or in design, where there would be slower moving water and where there would be faster moving water within this stream bed. And yeah, and I had fun. And so what I ended up doing was taking the blower and just basically blowing all the stone to the sides and churning it all up and blowing all the way down to the geotextile fabric that's underneath all of that stone. And basically all the silt that had basically fallen down through all the cracks between the stone, it just got all kicked up into the air, and I had to just kind of push it downstream as I was working, kind of like raking leaves in the wind.
Ugh.
Yeah, it was a mess, but it did rejuvenate the appearance of the stone, because it was starting to look really kind of old and dirty, like really dirty. But I was hoping there was some kind of trick or idea that I might be just totally overlooking. Doesn't sound like it.
I might comment that in other areas of life, people, soil conservation in the United States always used to incentivize the farmers to keep a sort of a permanent cover, X number of feet in from the banks of any river to prevent agricultural soils from running off into the river. Of course, we're losing our topsoil. 30% of it's gone out of the Midwest. You know, another 50 years, we're going to be in bad shape. Now, that all went out the window with the change to a more like, you know, cell mentality. There must be some kind of ground cover fix here. Yeah, let's check the Q&A here. An anonymous attendee, Randall, asks, remarks that their Unryu, that's U-N-R-Y-U, Unryu camellia climbing dragon variety has shot up. How do you prune?
They're climbing dragon camellia?
Yeah, variety Unryu. So
Unreal.
it must be a Sasanqua, Randall, because they have some fairly trailing varieties of Sasanqua.
Unryu? I wonder how you spell that.
U-N-R-Y-U. And R-Y-U, of course, means dragon in Japanese.
Okay, that's pretty good.
So
Oh,
might mean
and the
climbing.
twists back and forth, right? This one naturally twists? No.
I haven't a clue.
Yeah, I think this is the one that zigzags on its own, right? That's what it looks like on the internet pictures. I have seen the one that zigzagged, but I never knew what the name was. And so it's grown up too tall or grown too vigorous?
Yeah, Marcia says that, she says you saw it in Santa Cruz. So I didn't see it in Santa Cruz, but maybe you did, Randall, at a show or something.
Oh, Marcia?
Couchman, yeah.
Oh, maybe I just don't recognize the last name, but oh, okay. So it's grown too big. So usually you can just cut it back to another side branch. I mean, camellias are pretty forgiving. Is it, I guess it was maybe the leader's gotten too big?
Let us, I'm going to, oh, here's Frank Chance with a translation. Unryu means clouds and dragon. The name
Oh.
originated in, hold on, he went away. The name originated in cloud and dragon patterns of brocade. I don't know, Randall, if you were in Kyoto, you saw all those wonderful temple ceilings like Myoshinji with the dragons battling through the clouds and stuff. And they're all very serpentine in form, and it's very impressionistic. You can't tell.
Yeah, so I have not had the honor of going to Kyoto yet, but yeah, it does. It's like a serpent. The branches zig and zag. Yeah. I've seen some for sale in the at bonsai shows, bonsai vendors. Very interesting because it naturally is contorted. It has a lot of interest. It has a nice flower too. But it's similar to prune like any other camellia. The only thing is this one actually twists and turns. You don't need to put wire on it.
Hello.
Okay, here comes Marcia.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. Whatever the panelists I have here, I can't find the unmute button, and I didn't dare touch it because everything's been so jumbled. You saw this at my house. I do bonsai. I'm in several bonsai clubs here, and I don't generally know how to prune camellias well, but this particular one is beautiful. It just takes a while to get going, and it has shot up, and I don't want to destroy it. When you prune camellias, do you generally open them up so there's nothing growing toward the center so the light comes in? Is there anything else in particular about pruning camellias, Randall?
Well, it's if you always make sure you prune back to a side branch or a leaf. If you prune it now, you'll have less flowers because the bud should have already formed. But if you just do some thinning, maybe you don't need that many flowers. If you want to keep all your flowers, best time to prune it is right after it, about 75% of the blooms have finished blooming. But if, camellias are very understanding, but just as a general guideline, if you want to reduce a branch, cut it back to another side branch, or you got to cut it back to a leaf. I mean, they will bud back even on bare wood, but
Thank you.
yeah. If you've pruned other bonsais, camellias, I think, are pretty easy. You just got to be careful of the timing because you can lose your flowers for next year.
Thank you.
Hey, Randall, Frank Chance put up an image of a brocade unryu in the chat box, and unfortunately that might drop you. Well, you're done with your slides, so if you want, I'm gonna put that up on the screen for everyone's benefit, and then we're gonna get back to a couple of more questions. So here we go. This is gonna stop your slide, Randall.
Oh, that's good. That's a picture in Mendocino, our favorite place for my wife and I to go.
Okay, can everyone see this?
Yeah.
What we're seeing here is a bunch of battling dragons, or in any case, serpentine dragons. That's what the circular objects are, and then the clouds are diamond shaped here.
Yeah, the dragon, that's my wife's sign.
So anyone who's really interested, I would suggest you also Google Myo, M-Y-O-S-H-I-N, Myoshin J-I, Myoshinji Temple. And somewhere in those photographs, you're going to see the most incredible ceiling, worthy of the Sistine Chapel, of dragons in the clouds. And the serpentine character, as here, will be very evident. So, Randall, it's a very undulating and doubling and contorting camellia. Wonderful, kind of like a lace leaf maple.
Yeah. Nancy Schramm has a nursery in Gilroy, and she had a bunch for sale at the last bonsai fundraiser, Mammoth fundraiser, and she sold out really quick.
Well, Randall, one more question again from Marcia or Marcia. Marcia, thank you. She's following up with the oak root fungus that was affecting the junipers, and she asks what to do, or is all lost?
Well, oak root fungus is transmitted through the woody material in the soil, so we're going to have to plant something that's resistant. Or you got to dig out all the soil with any woody material.
That's a lot of remnant oak root fungus anywhere in coastal California. This is the land of the oak.
The oak tree is 25 feet away.
Yep. Yeah, it's taken out a lot of stuff. So, oh yeah, I guess that'll do it. Thank you, Randall Lee, for an engaging presentation. Thanks to the original webinar audience for their provocative questions and shared knowledge. And the conversation afforded the chance to imbibe the lecture information and form connections with like-minded people. Thanks to the Japanese people who, over generations, developed the life and living environment that's the subject of these webinars, and who generously shared this gift with the world. Thanks to the many artists, craftsmen, scholars, and organizations worldwide and here in the USA who've made this known. Notably, the North American Japanese Garden Association, Bonsai and Suiseki clubs, Japan-US Sister City Associations, and Sukiya Living Magazine, which shows and tells how this living environment's intangible essence may be realized all over the world with a diversity of tangible materials and forms not necessarily Japanese on their surface. They have universalized it as the Sukiya style living environment. Thanks to the Japan Foundation Center for Global Partnership for financial support. Thanks to the Oakland Fukuoka Sister City Association for producing these webinars. We invite you to view other recorded webinars in the Japanese style living environment webinar series. Thank you and see you next time.